Hello and welcome to the Mill. I am your host, Dusty Crane, and this week, let's talk about the February 2020 newsletter, along with the January 29 Facebook live stream, because there's a lot of overlap there. And I'm trying something a little new today. I've got some note cards here. I'm going to go ahead and just flip through those, and hopefully it's not loud or distracting, or I don't read as much from paper, but we'll see. My first card here, we're talking about the newsletter. I'm going to start there, and we're going to focus on that content to begin with. Jamie starts with Wingspan is going to be back in stock in the Stonemaier web store early February. So if you've been trying to get a hold of a copy of Wingspan from Stonemaier Games, looks like next week from now is the time to do so. It was almost like Jamie watched my episode of The Mill last week, because it seemed like a lot of the questions we talked about there actually came up in the live stream too. So one of the topics that is in the newsletter is the My Little Scythe delay, and particularly what happened. So it wasn't a catastrophic shipping failure or some shipping vessel that went down or anything like that. It turned out to be a few missing components that need to be made. So it seems like a few things missed being manufactured, and we talk about that a little bit in the live stream, so I'll go into that there. Another thing in the newsletter was let's talk about this graphic right here, the one with the dots. Let's go ahead and see how much progress has happened between January and February, shall we? The Wingspan Expansion 2 has officially been renamed Oceania expansion officially, and officially it is in development. Also, Codename Gold made some progress. It entered into solo design. That means Jamie went ahead and handed off the components or an idea of what the components are going to be and the rulebook to Automa Factory, so they can go ahead and start working on the Automa for Codename Gold. The Tapestry expansion is officially in blind playtesting and solo design. Now, I know playtesting's been happening for a while now, so that might just have been maybe just an omission or something like that, but also in solo design. So Automa Factory is going to be busy between Gold and the Tapestry expansion. Let's go ahead and get to Facebook Live. This was Wednesday, January 29th, and Jamie mentions that today, or that day, was actually the day he was going to start talking about My Little Scythe, the expansion. Let's see here, and he mentions that important piece that needed to be produced, and I'm trying to think of what important piece could that be, because I have a feeling that if it was something significant, like a new component, then I don't think that would be missed. So what I tend to think in terms of, like, when you look at the My Little Scythe box and the insert, we probably assume we're going to get a couple new Seekers. I cannot imagine the Seekers were missed, but there were a couple of little components that would have just been, kind of, maybe you wouldn't even think about it. There's still a couple of little empty holes there with the pie tracker, with some of those usual tokens, and maybe the little action selection marker. If I had to choose something that missed being manufactured, I think that would probably be it. Something that was in the original that you might have on hand, that maybe if you were just playing a game with the early stuff, that you would just substitute and maybe not think of. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, but I don't know. But yeah, I can't imagine if there was something new in the expansion, like a Seeker or something, if that's what we get, that would be missed. So that's my guess for what could have been forgotten to be manufactured. Jamie also takes a question about what's the status of the Viticulture expansions. And last we heard there was 5 people working on it. It was Jamie and 4 other developers. And what they decided to do was break into 2 teams. And each one of those teams of 2 took the ideas that they had and the ideas that Jamie provided. And those 2 teams separately are working on a new prototype. And I guess they're going to go ahead and take those ideas, and in a month and a half, they're going to come back with that initial prototype. And if all things go well, we could have 2 excellent Scythe two excellent Viticulture expansions in about a few years, I guess. The Tapestry Civilization Guide. This was another one of those topics where I said I feel like Jamie was listening to the mill. So I mentioned last week about not knowing the difference between what happened in the December update and the January update. It turns out what Jamie did was a lot of those adjustments actually had penalties when you got the civilization. So it didn't matter whether or not you got it at the beginning of the game or if you just happened to pick it up later. If you got one of those civilizations at a penalty, you took that penalty. So it because it's luck of the draw and you don't really have a choice, Jamie went ahead and just removed that penalty if you gain that civilization during gameplay. Now, the starting penalties still exist, but if you were to pick one up later, then you do not suffer that same penalty. If you are a Wingspan fan and you have been waiting for those neoprene mats to come back into stock, the full-size ones, not the ones that were just a hair too small, Jamie's going to have those in store probably sometime in March, so you can keep an eye out on that. Another question that Jamie fielded on the Facebook live stream was, will you make a Wingspan Legendary box? Now, you can see the side Legendary box just, kind of behind me there. And so Jamie acknowledged it's still a little weird for him to sell an empty box, but because we keep bothering him, he's going to keep making them. That was the gist. But he did say that he doesn't have any plans for a Wingspan Legendary box, but if he does make one, there'll be more in it than the side Legendary box. He said if he makes it, he'll likely have an organizer or something inside there. Probably makes a little bit more sense. It'll help support the box, which was one of the problems that the Legendary box was having with Scythe, and also, provide some function. And it's cards. It's not going to be, terribly intensive in terms of engineering. Now, another thing that came up was, Jamie was just going over his notes and the things that he shares. And he said that he played a pre-production copy of a new game. I don't know if this is Sand or Gold, but they went ahead and played the pre-production copy and found some stuff. Not that the game needed to change, but they made a few tweaks to the rules to make it more intuitive. And also, to give the components a run through. And I don't remember if he said something about, if any of the components needed to change, but that he did acknowledge that if they had done this for My Little Side, that they certainly would have caught the mistake that they forgot to engineer or produce. So this is a process that Jamie said will continue going forward. He thinks it's going to certainly help with the quality and catching these little mistakes. And so that's something, even if it pushes things out a month, he thinks it's well worth it. And I would agree because, on BGG, you hear more and more, you're starting to hear people say like, well, you don't get a first run. And, that's if there's no first run, people buying the pickup or no people picking up the first run, there's not going to be a second run, right? So I think this will really help the first edition quality right out the gate. So I think that's a fantastic idea. As it usually does, Scythe came up. Are we going to get any more Scythe expansions? Jamie said no. It was a hard no this time. It wasn't even, we'll see what happens, but he did say he's willing to explore Jakob's world of 1920 plus. And just recently, Jakob posted a new piece of artwork, and contrary to what we see in a lot of the other stuff he's posted, there's a lot of sand in this picture. Could this have anything to do with Codename Sand? It's pretty unlikely given, how close we are to the release, potentially of Codename Sand this year. I believe I don't have the printout in front of me, but it seems like that's probably the next main release from Stonemaier. So I would have thought that we probably would have seen some sand pictures before now, but we shall see. Now, Jamie did say something that kind of made me go... And what that was someone said, Jamie, I love Scythe. It's my favorite game. It's still my favorite game. What game would you recommend that kind of scratches that same itch? And Jamie said, Tapestry, he kind of feels as a follow-up to Scythe. And I went, I love Scythe. Scythe is my favorite game. I do not get the same feeling playing Tapestry that I get from playing Scythe, but maybe it depends on what you come to Scythe for. So maybe that track possession or the progression and the upgrades that you get feel similar to progressing down the track. So I can see the comparison, but I definitely, for me, doesn't feel like it scratches quite that same itch. But just a couple of minutes later, a couple of people later, someone asked, about Jakob's World in 1920 plus, and he did acknowledge that he has something in mind, but it wouldn't be a Scythe game, but it would be set in that same universe, so a different game type. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, but if I were, I would think if anything that Jamie's been planning kind of sounds like it could fit along the line of Scythe, I am going again to the LCG. He's been talking a lot about LCGs. I've been playing, Marvel Champions and enjoying my time with that. And also, one of the things that Jamie talked about that he saw a challenge of developing an LCG would be there being almost like some of these tell stories, and Jamie likes stories that have, that tell a full story, and it's not just where things go. So kind of willy-nilly, each one being kind of a separate thing. You have to have kind of an idea of where each one goes, and he likes there to be a definitive end. And so I guess if you did something with Scythe, I would imagine you'd want at least a few, maybe 4 of the people or the factions that we know, and then maybe some of the expansions are the other factions that you can play. I mean, that would certainly provide a end point, and what kind of story that provides, I guess, we would have to see. But I could see Scythe or the World of 1920 plus working, and man, we would get a lot more Jakob artwork from that too, I would imagine. So I'm in favor. If not an LCG, what kind of game could you see the next World of 1920 game being? What part of the newsletter or the live stream, maybe gets you most excited? Is it 2 possible Viticulture expansions? Is it picking up Wingspan next week? Is it, My Little Scythe when it eventually comes out? What was it that has you the most excited? Go ahead and leave me a note there in the comments. Let me know if there's anything you want to see. Until then, take care of yourself. Till next week. Until then, just some random then. Until next week, thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.